hello, and welcome to the 96th Fireside Chat with Tom Campbell. I am your co host, Adam Hashin, joined by my other co host, the always lovely Donna Aveni. And we are so very happy to be here today. And I know there are some excited participants ready for the chat here as well. Now, if this is your first time watching or participating, we like to keep things of a general nature in this chat, but don't let that hold you back from asking something entirely personal and important to you. That being said, it may not make the final cut for YouTube. I'd like to thank Tom here, especially for giving his time today, and to all the volunteers involved with My Big TOE in one way or another. We're always looking for committed volunteers to help push the projects along. We have so many irons in the fire, as they say. And if you feel like you have time to commit and make a difference, reach out, get involved. It's so helpful to have really committed, involved volunteers. It really makes the biggest difference. So I know we have some exciting questions ready to go.
Will, go ahead with your question.
Hey Tom, how you doing?
Good. It's been a long time since I've talked with you,
Yeah,
Will.
it's been a minute. Been a minute. Okay, so I actually have a question for you. It's a distinction, really, more than anything, about how you think about energy. Okay, so whenever I'm thinking about energy, I feel like there's a lot of different. I know that they're all the same thing. So you can just basically say, oh, they're all just energy, but they're also all very distinct things. Like, for example, if I take the little delta, tiniest pieces of consciousness of me, right? And then I take those and I try to focus my intent from all of the little pieces of consciousness of me, and I send that out. It's a very different kind of energy than the kind of energy of me walking down the street thinking about, what a parking spot or something like that. I don't really. And so is that something where as I continue on, I will start to just see them all as the same thing? Or is it really something where do you look at energies as different energies, but when you speak about them, you just say focused intent and energy, because you don't usually make distinctions between those. So I was just wondering if you just give us a little insight into how you perceive these things.
Okay, well, first of all, there really is no energy. It's all about information. Energy is a metaphor. And the metaphor, energy, means it's something that can affect or change something else. That's how we define energy. It's a thing that allows us to modify or change something else. And that takes energy. See, it's the function that creates force, or the function that creates a push or a nudge or a change of some sort. So if you have that idea that that is just a metaphor, we're talking about information, then you don't really visualize it as anything at all. It's just a metaphor for change, for a thing that causes change to happen. So then I don't really think too much in terms of energy. You say, all right, I'm going to heal somebody. I'm going to send them white energy. Well, if you're trying to explain it to someone who's not familiar with it, then that helps them understand it. You're sending energy to that person, and the energy is going to heal them. But in fact, that's not what's going on at all. You are going to modify the future probabilities such that when the measurement is made later on, they're going to be found out to be healthier, not sicker. So you're really, energy doesn't exist in a world of consciousness. It's just information. But it's a good metaphor to use when you're explaining things to somebody. Oh, I'm reading your energy. I can feel that you're upset. Well, you're not really reading their energy. You're getting data out of the database, or you're looking at facial expressions or something else that's giving you that information. So energy is a metaphor, not a real thing. So that's the way I think of it. So I hardly ever think in terms of energy. I think in terms of information. And I only use the word energy when I'm trying to explain something to somebody who would be very confused if I explained it all in terms of information.
So let's talk about that for just a minute, Tom. Okay, so let's talk about information. All right. So I'm listening to the words you're saying, and I'm trying to take these and then understand them as a being level understanding of what you're saying from your words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I need to explore this just a little bit more. So when you say information, right? So I query, I get information, right? And then I decide that I'm going to change the information to a different future probability. So I take that and I move, I have it's not a wellness, but I have a focus for the thing to be different. So are you putting any push on the ball, or is it just it is and therefore it must be type of thing like that?
Well, the push on the ball is a metaphor, and it helps you understand it in kind of physical terms, right? You use the push to change something. I'm gonna put energy on that dark spot to turn it white. Yeah, put white energy on it. So you use that metaphor to focus your intent on what's going on, but you're not really, the only thing you're changing isn't a physical thing. You're not physically moving something from here to there. You're simply modifying the probability of certain outcomes is what you're doing. So if you can think in your mind, my energy modifies future probability, well, you might think about that. Or you might say, my intention, is modifying future probability. That's more correct. But it's not that your intention actually goes there and shoves the probability this way or that. It's just that that's the way the system is designed, is that your intent modifies future probability. Everybody's intent modifies future probability, whether they want to or not. It's just the way the system works. So you can think of it in terms of energy because that makes it more physical. It makes it less abstract and more concrete. And for most people, dealing in the abstract is difficult. So they like to make abstract things more concrete. So that's why we use energy. I take my energy bar tool and I have, white light comes out of the end of my energy bar tool to make that black stuff go away and become white. So all of that is a tool that people make up in their mind to help them perform something that is not physical, but kind of make it physical. So it's sort of like I got this physical tool and I'm going to do a physical thing with it because we understand that. The abstraction is that all you're doing is changing probability with an intent. It all works in consciousness and it's all an abstraction. Much harder for people to wrap their minds around. So energy is just a metaphor. If it helps you communicate and it helps you focus your intent, then by all means use it. Nothing wrong with using tools. Tools are good. They help us function within an abstract world, and the tool seems more concrete to us. So I don't really think about energy. I just think about, I know what modifies future probability, so I just do that. And I think of it in terms of changing information. Probability is just information. It's how information, relates to a particular situation. So modify that information and then the situation's modified. I've been doing it for a long time. So dealing within the abstraction is pretty easy for me, but most people have a hard time just dealing in the abstraction. If they just looked at somebody who was ill and they pointed a finger at him and said, heal, they wouldn't be able to put much force behind that because it's too abstract. But if they can get their energy bar tool and if they can get rid of that black spot, now they have the feeling of having done something. And you can't expect a result until you've done something. Well, the doing is really irrelevant. It's just the mind. The only active ingredient is your mind, is intent. But it helps us focus that intent. So I don't know, Will, does that help? Or are you still not getting there?
I understand, but now this kind of it leads to a little bit of a confusion for me. Okay, so right now, let's say, so I'm sending you some Shaktipat energy, right? So I'm sending it to you, Okay, I'm sending it to you. How do you describe that if you don't describe it as energy? Like, what are the words for what I just sent you right there, Tom? Like, what is that? It's not energy. It's not, is it even future probability? Like, what was that I just sent to you?
How would I describe it? Well, if I receive it, I would put it in terms of what it felt like to me. And what it felt like to me would be talking in physical terms. Well, it made me feel warm, or it made me feel cold, or it made me feel happy, or something like that. So when we talk to people, we have to speak the language of physical process because that's what people understand. So you talk about the effect. You wouldn't talk about the energy. I don't know if that helps or not, but again,
It
energy
does.
is kind of
So
the it's kind
it's
of the
not it's not
silent
it's about
partner.
it's not about the thing, it's about how you perceive the thing as it really is, so that you can actually use it in an effective manner. It's not so much about the feeling of the thing, and don't get fooled by the feeling of the thing. It's the thing itself that you have to really understand.
I think that's maybe a good way to put it. The thing itself, though, is very abstract. It's not something that most people can get their minds around. It's an abstraction. So when you discuss these things with people, you almost always talk in terms of things that they can understand from a physical perspective, like energy or feeling or something like that, because that's our language. Our language has developed to describe physical things and feelings. And we don't really speak to each other abstractly. We speak to each other with concrete things. And yes, how I feel about it is not just necessarily what you sent or even the intent that you sent it with. What I feel is going to be my own interpretation of what you send, not necessarily what you send. It's how it affects me. How aware am I? How tuned in am I with you? Are we doing this together? Is it something you send to me while I'm off doing something else? So it's not just what you send and my getting it, it's my interpretation of what I get. And you may send me healing energy to heal, some problem I'm having, and I may just not receive that at all, may have no notion of it, but it just helps me get better. Or I may feel it. I may feel it as a warmth, or I may suddenly think of Will. Oh, Will's doing something. You know, I can get it from all sorts of different ways, and that's my interpretation of what you get. So the actual thing you're sending is nothing. You're not sending anything. It's already there. You're just communicating. Sending kind of has this idea it's coming from you to me, but there's no real dimension in consciousness. It's not that you're taking something from you and now you're moving it through space somehow to the other person and now they're getting it. Consciousness doesn't have any space. It's just a matter of you having a thought. That thought is directed at me. I get that thought and I interpret it to be something. That's very abstract. People can't wrap their minds around that sort of thing.
That's great, Tom. Thank you.
That was good. I appreciate Will, you digging into the answer and asking some follow-up questions. That really helps to focus that answer and glean some more insight out of it. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And we're going to move on. Our next question comes from Caroline. And before I let her ask it, I also want to congratulate her and for taking the lead, becoming president of the Consciousness Hub organization. That is a lot of work, right? That is not just for a title. She's signing up to do a lot of work as a volunteer. That is really a commendable act. If you guys don't know what Consciousness Hub is, it's an organization set up to proliferate Tom's work. Tom's not going to be here forever, and we want his work to continue to spread long after he's gone. So we've set up the organization now to get the ball rolling and get some projects going. Not to mention, they are the vehicle in which you are going to be able to license Tom's IP to create profit generating products of your own. So I think they're going to do a video on this shortly, but a call to all creators. You can use Tom's work, good licensing deals. If you can make some money off the IP, it's available. We're just trying to spread the message, and a special big thank you for Caroline for stepping up and taking this role and position. It is a lot of work. And anyone who's doing it, I am not envious. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, let's let Caroline ask her a question. You're up.
Thank you for your kind words, Adam, and for promoting our hub, because I'm really honored to step into this role, and we have a lot of cool projects coming up. They're going to be live streams with Tom, workshops with people who have amazing skills. So also, if you have something to share, now is the time to step up. I think it's time to collaborate. So don't hesitate. Contact us, sign up, and we'll be happy to see as many of you there. So just to my question now, I would be super curious, Tom. What is the most significant thing you have learned lately, like an insight or lesson that made you go like, wow, that makes a lot of sense?
I don't know that I have one of those real recently. They come and go. I am learning all the time. It's not like I'm done learning. Things happen to me. I've got a couple of things that I've done over the past probably 4 months that are all part of the same thing. And I'm kind of collecting those thoughts to then do about maybe a 1-hour video with some new information about the nature of reality and how we change and how we evolve and that sort of thing. But I'm still putting all the pieces together. So I'm not quite ready to do that yet. I sent out a little sample of that to a bunch of people when it first started, and a phone with the record button pushed was put in front of my mouth as I was talking about it. So that was rather informal, and some of you probably got that. But I'd like to elaborate on that and make it a little more, I don't know, coherent rather than just what comes off the top of my head before I do it. So that will be out, I don't know, hopefully in a couple of months. My life is very busy now, but I'd like to pull all that together. So that kind of represents a new way of thinking, a new concept on the process of growing and changing. And how do we as individuals and as a culture, how do we as cultures, how do we as a human race evolve? What's the process involved in that? So that's a work in progress. So I'd say that's the latest new thing, but I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet. And besides, it would take at least an hour to explain it, and this is not the venue for that. But just as a footnote to what Adam had to say about Caroline, to just underline how serious she is about this business, everybody should know that where Caroline lives now, this is 3:00 in the morning for her. And there she is, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go. And it's the middle of the night. So you have to be pretty dedicated to get up and do a fireside chat in the middle of the night. So I was very pleased when Caroline took that position. I think she's going to be marvelous in it. She's energetic, she's bright, and she is very positive. And that's a real important attribute. You have to have a very positive attitude to work in and around MBT. That's probably the most important thing to have, is to have a positive outlook on life. And you don't look at a problem and go, oh no, a problem. you look at a problem and go, oh, wow, what can we do about that? So it's just a different way of looking at the world. And Carolyn, I think, is going to be an awesome head of the hub. And I'm looking forward to working with her in that position from now forward.
Thank you so much for your kind words. And I'm looking forward for all the new insights you're going to share with us and all the collaboration we'll have in the future, because the only way this is going to work out is if we collaborate and work as a team. And I think so far we have a pretty good team and it's growing. So I'm really excited.
Thank you, Carolyn. All the best. Justin, so nice to see you again. Please go ahead with your question for Tom.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be back with you guys live. It's been a while. So Tom, I kind of joined spontaneously, but I do have a question, but it might take me just a second to formulate it. But it relates to meditation sessions that I've been doing recently. I've kind of shifted from focusing on trying to have or instigate the immersive type nighttime experiences to just meditation, like seated meditation. And during that, I started to seemingly get information as like a download. And what you were describing before really resonates, the idea that it's just abstract, because as I try to interact with the information, it feels very conceptual and as if it takes place in mind space, which is seemingly different than the immersive experiences that I've had. But what I'm starting to realize is the conceptual mind space type experiences seem like they're actually a better or more fundamental way to interact with the information as opposed to the immersive experience where it's kind of forced filtered down into just sensory perception, or at least primarily as the experience. So the question is, well, in the meditation sessions, I actually started recording my own voice because at the end it was too much to write down and remember. So I just started recording and just kind of blabbing as the sessions were going on. And it made me think of your time with Bob Monroe and listening to the Explorer tapes. And I started to think, how immersive were people's experiences there? I'm sure each one is different, but it also made me wonder, because in my mind, I had always imagined that, oh, they're having the immersive type of out of body experiences that I've had in the past, using the sneak up techniques at nighttime. But it made me think, well, wait a minute, maybe that's actually not the way most of the interactions were happening. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the difference between those two types of experiences, how much they overlap, and your own experience in terms of if you have more of one or more of the other. Is that give you enough info to go with?
Yes, it does. Well, I do it both ways. But the way I probably do it most is just with the interaction with mental space, because that's easy, it's direct, and you don't have a lot of translating to physical process. So it's just a simpler thing to do, and it's just as effective. And I'd say that probably at least 50% of the things that like were on the Explorer tapes, they were probably about half of them were more of the classical out of body, and the other half were just connected in mind space. And of those two, if I were just needing some information or needing to check on something or whatever, the experience I would have would just be in mind space, because there you throw away all the unnecessary information. You are just a consciousness interacting with another consciousness, whether that's the larger consciousness system or someone else. You're just interacting at the consciousness to consciousness level. You don't need to have a body. You don't need them to have a body. You don't have to talk to something that has a head and two eyes, a nose and a mouth, and watch their mouth move as you get the words. All of that physical process is beside the point. It gives you a warm feeling of being there. It's more physical, it's more concrete, but it doesn't actually add much to what you get. It's more efficient, and in most cases more effective, to just have that interaction in mind space. You're exchanging information with a source, of some sort. Now, if you're doing a mind-to-mind connection with somebody, then it's with their mind. But you don't really have to visualize them and their body and all the rest of it in your body, and you're meeting someplace, to discuss things. That's a lot of unnecessary dross that really is not significant. What's significant is the information. What does it mean? What does it tell you? And you can ask questions and you can have feedback and go back and forth. But eliminating having to make it physical to make it seem real is something we do when we're not quite sure it's real. So we want to see that physical stuff because that lets us know that it's just like being here, it's real. And eventually you just let that go because the physical stuff really isn't that important. It's the message. Now, if you are, if you're doing things like remote viewing, all you need to do is get the information of what the spot that's your target, what's going on there. What are you looking at? And again, that's just a matter of data. You don't have to have your body hovering over the Eiffel Tower. All you have to do is get the information, the Eiffel Tower. Now you can have, the classical out of body where you go out of body and you see your body lying there in the bed, and then you fly up through the ceiling and out to some adventure, and you can have that kind of thing. But the more that you're in the business and the more that you do that, the less significant that is. But it's kind of the proof for the beginner that what they're doing is a real thing because it looks real and it feels real and it smells real and it tastes real. So you say, it must be real. And if you just got the information, you'd say, gee, did I just make that up? Or is that real? Eventually you outgrow that, did I just make that up? And you realize that it is important and significant because you've used it and dealt with it hundreds, if not thousands of times. And you don't need all its physical kind of picture to convince you that it's real. So most of the time now, I'd say it's just mind to mind. It's a mental connection. You gather information and you use that information, and all the rest of it is not relevant. But if I want to, I can also, go out and turn around and look at my body laying in the bed and so on. That happens because I have the intention for that to happen. Now, it happens to beginners because they have the expectation, because they have this belief that they are in their body and they're going to get out of their body somehow. And when you get out of your body, what do you expect to see? Your body, because you just got out of it. So all of that happens just because of a belief that the person has that they're in their body. If they didn't have that belief that they were somehow getting out of their body, then they wouldn't look back and see their body. There's no need to look back and see your body. That's just verification of your belief. So you have an intent to verify your belief, then that's what you see. That's what you get. So there's nothing fundamental about going out of body and seeing your body in the bed. That's a sop to the belief that what you did is just got out of your body. And most people who do go out of their body, they do that in the beginning. They get out and they see their body because that's where you start with that kind of idea. You're still kind of locked into the physical process to make you feel like it's real. But eventually, when you can do that pretty much on demand whenever you want, you give that up. You kind of get out and go wherever your intent is. You don't necessarily start from your bedroom up above your body. You just go and you're there. It's not a process of having to travel to get there. It's just you're instantly wherever it is you want to be at whatever reality or whatever else you're visiting. And it's an instantaneous kind of a process, not one that you have to go see your body and go out through the roof and fly someplace. All of that is a belief in physical process. And physical process makes us feel like it's real. And if we don't get that feeling that it's real, then maybe we're just making it all up in our heads. You see, maybe it's just our imagination. And that's a little scary thought. So we don't like that. We like that physical process because that makes it more real. But all of this is kind of silliness. It's all mind games that you play with yourself. And the way you know it's real is that you gather information that works out to be true. And when you get true information often enough, you stop asking, is this real? Because the things you get are important. You can use them. They're significant. They help you grow up. They give you information that you need and that you want. And as long as that's happening, why label them as real or whatever? They are what they are, and you get what you get, and they're valuable. That's the question to ask, not are they real? The question to ask is it valuable? And if it is valuable, then the process that leads you to that value is kind of irrelevant. So that's more of the experienced, more grown-up view. And the beginner, though, needs that assurance. And he finds his adventures to be very physical, very sometimes more physical than the physical. I had plenty of out-of-bodies that were more detailed, more vibrant, more alive. When you get back to this reality, it seems kind of grayed out, like it's not quite as alive and real as the reality I just left. But you get what you expect for the most part until you get over that having the expectation. And then usually all you get is what you need, which is the information.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Could I ask a follow-up question related to that?
Sure.
So as I've been getting this information and regurgitating it into a microphone, a lot of it's really interesting and compelling, but some of it, it's like, I don't know what to do with it. So I just write it down and let it be. But to kind of try to verify whether the information is accurate, I've been doing a lot of remote viewing, where it's basically selecting between two images, and you select the one that's correct. So it's more definitive whether or not you got it right or wrong. But so that success rate's maybe only 60% or so right now. So I guess it makes me wonder, does that mean roughly, a small percentage of the information I'm getting in the meditations is inaccurate or filled with my own interjections? Or do you think it's maybe more tied up in my expectations and belief in regards to remote viewing and kind of being attached to the outcome versus the meditation sessions? It's like, I get stuff. I don't know if it's real or not. It's interesting. Some of it's useful, and there's not really any attachment to it, I guess. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And there's several things at play there. One is that we need to convince ourselves early on that what we're experiencing is real, that we're not just lost in our own imagination, because that, for all, particularly all left brain people, that's the big error. That's the big bugaboo, that's waiting, is that it's just all in your imagination, just making it all up, So you have to prove to yourself that that's not true. Now, the people who are very right-brained and not logical process, they don't have that problem. They don't have that problem at all. They know that it's something that's real because they've been doing it mostly, their whole life. That's just the way they are. That's the way they process, and they know that there's value in it. So they don't have this question, is it real? But all of us technical types and all of us left-brainers, we need proof that this is just not our wild imagination, that there's something real going on. So then it's important for us to prove to ourselves that that's the case. So we do things like remote viewing, and there's an easy way to do that that's maybe a little more complicated, a little more evidential than just a 50-50 chance, would be to go to the websites that have, you pick a number, and with that number is associated a picture. And supposedly there's 100,000 pictures, each with their number in the database. And you just get a number, and now you have to determine what the picture is like that is associated with that number. And then you do all sorts of details. You look at the ambience. What does it smell like? What does it look like? What are the colors that dominate? And you go through all these things. And if you do that, almost everybody has some success. They come up with the right colors or the right ambience or the right smell or even the right the right picture. They draw a picture that captures, most of the elements, much of the architectural elements of what they're seeing. And that then leaves credence to the fact that you are really getting information paranormally. You're not just making it up. You can't see a picture of, ducks in the water and a pine tree on the other side of the lake. And if you get the pine tree and the ducks and the water, well, that's the main stuff that's there. Yes, there's grass growing and there's a rock on the side, and you miss that. But what's the probability of you getting those three elements out of this picture just randomly? Well, it's pretty close to zero. What are the possibilities of what could be on a picture? Well, those are a very large number of possibilities there. So if you get things that are similar, then you're getting paranormal information. So that's a good way to prove to yourself that what you're getting is real information. And I recommend that for particularly left brain beginners. They have to go through that process of verifying. But once you get through the point where you don't ask, is it real anymore? You just ask, how useful was that information? Then you kind of dispense with those things. You don't spend much time on them anymore because you start asking, what's the value? And sometimes when you ask, what's the value, you don't really know. You get something and you look at it and you say, I don't know what the value of that is. What was that? Sometimes you don't know. Now, if you have practiced your meditation and you can get pretty much an empty mind, and stray thoughts almost never come through your mind, and you're good at meditation, you can hold that state for an hour, say, then most everything you get will make sense. But if you still have stray thoughts that come here and there, some of what you get is going to be nonsense. It's going to be those stray thoughts interacting with what you're doing, and you're going to get some nonsense. So getting some nonsense now and again is also pretty normal. This idea, well, if I'm really remote viewing, I'd get everything right and I wouldn't ever get anything wrong. Well, yes, if your mind was perfectly steady and perfectly serene and perfectly surrendered to that moment, and your intellect never got involved, yes, you could probably get 98% right. But most people's minds aren't that buttoned down, and we don't always know it when we have stray thoughts, but if you pay attention to them, most people have them quite often. So you should expect a little junk in there unless you are a very, very precise meditator and very solid and can maintain that state without having any thoughts pass through your mind. So those are some of the things that will make that difference. So I wouldn't worry about getting some junk along with the stuff that's valuable. Basically, you look at it and you throw away the junk and say, well, this other stuff, I'm going to act on that, or I'm going to keep that in mind, even if I don't act on it, to see how that works out. Is that valuable or not? Sometimes when you think it's junk, it's not junk. It's just that you don't understand what you've got. It's some kind of a metaphor. Most of the language you get when you are in an altered state is metaphoric. I mean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'll hear a sentence or a paragraph, and it's just like reading a book. It's just, or somebody speaking to you, and it's very precise. But most of the time, it comes in metaphors. And you have to look at the metaphor and think about, well, how does that metaphor apply to me? What's it mean, if anything? And it may be that you just haven't cracked the interpretation of the metaphor yet, and it could be that it's just junk. You don't know for sure, and that's okay. You accept that. Take what you get that's useful and throw the rest away and go on. If that metaphor is important for you, you'll get it again. And if you still miss it and it's important for you, you'll get it again. And eventually you'll figure out what that thing is that keeps coming back and what it means. And you can ask. You can just use your intent and say, what does this mean? I don't get it. 3 times in a row, I've gotten a little pig, running through the grass, and and at the end, it turns into a rabbit and hops into a hole. What does that mean? I don't get that. And you could say, please tell me in some other way that I can better understand it, because I'm not getting this. And I've had that work for me sometimes, where I get things and I know they're meaningful because they repeat, but I don't know how they're meaningful, because things that repeat often are coming from some source. You know, it's usually something you need to think about. And I've asked this system to try some other way other than that kind of visual metaphor to get it to me. And typically that'll work. They will do that. So don't be too hard on yourself when you're doing this, Justin. Some junk is okay. Just toss it out. Use the stuff, and the more you do it, the more you'll build confidence in it. The more confidence you have, the more correct it's going to be. Because most of the things that are wrong is because you don't have confidence in what you're doing. When your confidence is kind of shaky, then you get all kinds of junk because of that. So it's a pulling yourself up with the bootstraps that takes a fair amount of time and patience to get there. But that's normal. That's just the way it works. So did that help you?
Yeah, definitely. That was super helpful. I really appreciate that. I could go on and on, but I'll give up my time and let someone else go.
All right, well, it looks like we have Lyle up next. I don't see Lyle, but is it your question, Mariana?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, fantastic.
Um, so my question is about bigger picture. I'm always trying to keep an eye on bigger picture, and sometimes I lose the sight of it because of intensity of the experience, and then I try to find it again. So it's not. My question is not like I don't mind anything in particular. It's abstract about bigger picture. So lately I found myself in a very contrast world, and it seems it's getting more intense and more contrast, like very high entropy things happening, and there's very good things happening at the same time. And a lot of people get challenged in very unique, very productive way that it makes them come out of their comfort zone and out of their shelf and face their fears. It doesn't seem like anyone is resting on the sidelines right now. Everyone is working. Everyone is get challenged, and I'm just wondering what's going on, bigger picture wise. What we rolling into?
Okay, so you're saying that in your day-to-day life, there's a lot of contrast. There's things that are good and things that are bad, and everything seems to be a bit jumbled up and hard to sort out. And what's going on there? And what should you get out of it? And how should you approach it? Is that kind of the question?
It's not my life. It feels like overall in this PMR, like everyone is like that right now.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what LCS is up to.
Okay, well, you've probably heard me talk about how we have an opportunity to grow up in the next couple of decades. That is, the pace of our evolution is getting faster, and we're able to take bigger steps than we have before. So change is coming. And when change comes, there's usually pushback to that change. So change tends to be volatile. Change tends to have a lot of dysfunction comes with it. Whenever you have big change, and if that big change is coming in a short amount of time, you can bet that there's going to be a lot of dysfunction, a lot of turmoil, a lot of things going frontwards and backwards at the same time. That's just the way quick change is. And the pace of our evolution is quickening. The pace is getting faster. There's reaction to that, trying to go the other way. So we just live in a space right now of turmoil. And that's because change is coming quickly. You know, it used to be that the big social changes happened over millennia. Then the big social changes happened over many decades, like the Industrial Revolution, right? The idea that machines could do a lot of work, that you could have a machine that would go out and harvest the crop instead of people going out and picking cotton. They had a cotton gin that you could run through there, you know, being pulled by another machine, and you could do the whole thing in a day that took 3 weeks to do with 50 people. So we thought, well, that Industrial Revolution made a lot of change, but that change happened over what, 150 years? And it was still traumatic. Well, now we have changes that, as they say, are on internet time. We have changes that are coming very fast because the whole world is connected. It used to be that if you had something you wanted to say, you could put a soapbox up in the park and get up on it, and maybe 50 people could hear what you were saying. More than that, they were too far away to hear what you were saying. So you could talk to 50 people at a time. Well, now you can get on the internet and you can talk to 50 million people in the next 2 days or 3 days. So things happen more quickly. Everything is going very fast with this change. And when you have change happening fast, you have dysfunction. Because with every change, there's resistance to that change. There's people who want to keep it the way it was because they were doing very well with the way it was. And there are people who are not doing so well that really want the change to happen. And there's always a lot of, growling and fussing and pushing and shoving and dysfunctional behavior when you have fast change. And that's where we are now. So that's kind of what's happening in the bigger picture. And this change, how long is it going to last? How long is it going to take us to, the Industrial Revolution was like a century and a half, coming and going. So how long is this going to be? Another century and a half? I don't think so. I think this is going to be measured not in centuries, but in decades. We're talking about maybe 2 decades, 3 decades, as we turn the corner from the industrial age into the information age. We're going to have some dysfunction going on. And that's, I think, what you're seeing. You're seeing the kind of the chaos that's coming with fast change. And those who want the change and those who don't want the change are now struggling with each other. And the change is going to happen anyway. If you're against the change and it's a fundamental change that's coming, it's going to happen. But it isn't going to happen in a smooth, comfortable way. It's always going to have to fight its way, into the minds of the mainstream. So I think that's the big picture of what's going on now. I'm very positive about the final outcome because I know the final outcome sooner or later is going to be really good because evolution is relentless. It may be slow, but it's relentless. So we'll get there. But how long will it take us to get there? Well, I think we can do it in a few decades, and I believe we probably will do it in a few decades. And we just happen to be at that time where all these changes are taking place, and we're caught right in the middle of it. So we get to experience the turmoil that happens. You go back in what the beginning and middle 1800s, and there was a lot of turmoil was being created by the Industrial Revolution. A lot of things that weren't nice went on. A lot of abuse went on. We went over to Asia and we captured people and threw them in a boat and took them over to work on the railroads. And there was a lot of things about that Industrial Revolution that was not very nice. And we're going to see things like that right now in our life. But the changes, I think, are they're going to happen anyway. And though we got a lot of noise going on right now, that will all settle out. But what, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Well, that seems like a long time when you only have what's our lifespan now, 80 years or 70, 78 years or something like that. So that seems like a long time, like a big chunk of your life. But in the bigger picture, that's a very short time. And this change now in the information age isn't going to last for a century and a half. It's going to take place in decades, and that's what's going on right now, the big picture. But it's a good time to be here. It's a good time to be alive and involved in this, because we who are here now are going to be the people that'll make a difference on whether it takes a decade or a century. The things we do, the understanding that we have is going to make the difference of whether it's a shorter time or a longer time. So we're very key players right now in this time. Yes, our lives are a little turned upside down and things can get a little difficult. People aren't sure whether they should stay or run or hide or what they need to do, but it will turn out well, I think. Over 2 or 3 decades, we'll come out the other side, and the people who are alive and going through this are going to be the ones who make the decision, whether it's shorter or longer, depending on their choices and what they do. So it's a very valuable and important time to be in the mix, although it's going to be tumultuous for a while. Does that help?
Yep. One more. What would be your advice to buckle up, and what would be the best way to buckle up for the journey?
Well, the way you buckle up in this one is just with the right attitude. And the right attitude is to stay positive. It's to realize that all of this is happening and we have to go through it. It's not like it's just going to be easy and we're just going to slide from the ethic of control, power, force to the ethic of kindness, caring, and love, that's just going to be a smooth slide from one to the other. It's not going to happen that way. There's going to be a lot of turmoil. And just realize that turmoil is in the process of bringing us something better. And we may have to go for a while through something worse before we get to something better. Sometimes you have to back up before you can go forward. Sometimes you have to hit the bottom of the barrel where everything is so awful before you really realize what good feels like and looks like. So yes, it's not smooth, but the attitude to take is that we are part of something important, and our choices are important at this time. And that we need to just let people be who and how they are and not get personally upset or angry over what's going on, because if we do, we become part of the problem. We're just one more angry person. And it doesn't matter which side you're on, it's just another angry person makes everything worse, not better. So don't get angry, don't get upset, don't get afraid. Just say, we live in interesting times, right? The old Chinese curse, you live in interesting times, and that we'll make the best choices we can as they come to us. And if hardship comes to us, we'll do the best we can with that. But we won't get upset. We won't blame everybody else for what's going on. We'll just live and stay positive, and don't get angry. Don't get upset. Just do the best you can with what you've got as it happens. And if we do that, we'll come out the other side much quicker and much sooner than if we get upset and we get angry and we start fussing and fuming too. And then the whole thing is going to drag on a lot longer. So the best way to deal with it is to accept that we are in a process of change now, and that sometimes things have to get worse before they can move forward. Sometimes there's lessons to be learned in that trauma, and just stay positive and do your part and keep your eyes and ears open, because if people are kicking in the doors to making other people disappear. Well, now you need to go someplace else. It's no longer safe here. So you have to keep your eyes open. It's not that you're just foolish and Pollyanna. Oh, everything's going to be fine, and just go through life without paying attention. That's never a good idea. You need to pay attention. You need to stay safe. You need to make good choices, but you don't need to panic, and you don't need to get upset, and you don't need to get angry, and you don't need to blame anybody. It's just the turmoil we're going through to get from, to make this transition from materialism to consciousness as the fundamental thing. So I think that's what's going on in the very biggest picture, is we're growing up, and the growth now is getting faster to the point that it causes turmoil. So see, that's a very positive outlook on it, not a negative outlook. So stay positive.
Thank you, Tom. I think we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Hello, Brennan. How are you today?
Good. How are you
Good.
doing, Donna?
Great.
Wonderful to see your face.
Thank you. Same here. Go ahead
Hope
with your
hope
question for
everyone's
Tom.
doing well. Yeah, Tom, I feel like I just saw you, but so my question has to do with future probability and how sometimes, and I feel like we've all experienced this, and I've heard you tell a story once about it, and it can do with, to preface this, it has to do with anything with future probability, healing, manifestation, making yourself grow, trying anything to do with changing future probability, right? Any one of those things. So sometimes, or let's just back up for a second here. I've heard you tell a story about, medicine showing up in a cabinet, kind of like out of nowhere. It wasn't there, and then it was there. I've had experiences like that, even recently, and they've happened my whole life, physical things coming out of nowhere. And also, we've read, all of us probably, about spontaneous healings, about, a tumor that was there one day and it's completely gone the next day. And sometimes healing takes a year, and sometimes it happens instantly. So if I can put that with everything, sometimes you can manifest a physical object out of thin air almost instantaneously, and other times it's not going to happen at all. And healing the same way, and even growing yourself or going out of body or any of these things. So I just wanted to curious what your thoughts were on that. And I think this kind of relates back to Will's question somewhat, because of the energy thing that, like you said, it's a tool and a metaphor for us to understand. So are there different types of data? If it, like you said, it's all data, is some data different than others, or more powerful, or easier to read, or easier to unzip than others? Because it seems to be, six half dozen or the other. It goes any way all the time. And I didn't know what your insights on why sometimes it's instant and sometimes it may never happen.
It's not about the different qualities of data. That's not the place to look for it. The place to look for the answers is that this is a virtual reality, and it's generated by consciousness. Consciousness, the conscious system, is an aware system. It's conscious. It's aware. It knows what it's doing, why it's doing it, and what's going on. It's aware. So in a virtual reality, your reality is a data stream, your interpretation of this data stream. So something just materializes in your house, or a medicine in the chest, or any other kind of thing, or perhaps even dematerializes in your house and just disappears for no reason. Either of those can happen. It's a very simple thing in a virtual reality to make things appear and disappear. It's just, if you make them disappear, it's just not in the data stream. And you want to make them appear, it is in the data stream, because that is your reality. So it's a trivial thing for the system to have things come and go however it likes. Now, the system is not random. It doesn't just randomly make things come and go. There needs to be a reason. It does that quite purposefully. So if it's part of your own education to notice that things just appear and disappear around you physically, because that will open your mind to, oh my God, what's going on? What was that? You know, this wasn't here yesterday. And I've been searching for my car keys, and I thought they'd be on the desk. And I looked at the desk. I picked everything up on the desk. I looked everywhere around the desk, and a half an hour later, in frustration, I can't find them. I go, and there they are, sitting right in the middle of the desk, right where nobody could miss them. They're just right there on top in the middle of the desk. And you say, how is that possible? Well, that's possible because this is a virtual reality, and those car keys are in the data stream, and they can be taken out of the data stream. And the larger consciousness system is trying to show you something, that reality is not this button down thing that you can always compute. It's not that, this is the fast kind of change data, and this is the slow change data. And if I do these things, that things happen. It's often not like that. It's often just, these are things to help you see a bigger picture. And you realize life is like that. Things come, things go, and you're never quite sure about why that's happening, but you live that way, and that you begin to open your mind to things that are outside of the box for you. In other words, your box gets bigger. So when these things happen, you know, how you interpret the data depends on how big your mind box is. If you've got a lot of experience, then you have a much bigger decision space. If you don't have much, you don't. So when these things happen to you, what they do is they open your decision space. The possibilities of reality start to grow, and you can think, who knows what's going to happen next? This is a crazy world, but I'm having fun living here. And I think it's delightful that things show up and things disappear. And it's just part of living in this space. And your whole mind kind of starts living in a larger reality where anything's possible. And you're not so buttoned down in your little reality where everything has to obey the rules. So it's just part of a growing process, things that happen, and they're calculated to help you grow up and see bigger pictures. You find these things happening to you, and like you say, they've been happening all your life, you know, but your mind is pretty wide open because of that. It's happened all your life. Almost anything could happen, and you wouldn't be surprised. You'd say, that's weird. I don't know where that came from, but okay. And you go on with it. So that's pried your mind open quite a bit, to have that attitude of acceptance that things are beyond what, you know, you think the rules would say. So that's what a lot of it is. It's just the LCS helping you pry your mind open and keep it open with those kinds of things. It's just a lesson. And besides that, the larger conscious system has a really good sense of humor, and it has fun doing things like that. You know, it has fun making you look for your car keys all over the house, and you really thoroughly went over your desk, and there they are sitting right on top, all sprawled out, where anybody would have seen them, and you obviously looked there and they weren't there before. Hey, who found my car keys and put them on the desk? You know, but it has a good sense of humor. So you sometimes get funny things like that just because it likes playing. So that's, you know, that's where some of that comes from. But it's not because if you think of this way and you think of that way and there's difference, it's not a mechanical kind of thing. You have to remember the reality you live in is created by a conscious being that has a sense of humor, does things to help us grow, particularly if you're a person of interest who's been growing. They do things especially to you because you are a person of interest who's growing. And somebody who absolutely will have none of that, because none of that exists, and it's all stupid and it's all foolish, and the people who say that are all making it up. Those kind of people, they don't get that kind of treatment. They just are left alone to get by however they get by. You get played with a lot because it's fun for you and it helps you grow up. So you get a lot of interaction with the LCS, and other people don't get any interaction at all because they're not able to process it. It would freak them out. It would frighten them. They wouldn't be able to deal with it. So part of it is that you're open to it. That's part of why you get that. And part of it is that these are things to help you learn. So that's that's part of an answer. And I'm not sure that satisfies all your question, but go ahead and reframe it if you'd like.
I think you did a good job. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think I know the answer to this next part of it, but I still think I should ask it. It might be beneficial. It's going to be beneficial for me, but I think anybody else also that's interested. So if we wanted to, nurture that connection and to get those things to come easier as consciousness ourself, to connect with that thing so that maybe they start to do happen, or when we actively try and are aware of what we're trying to do, whether it be healing or manifesting, a future probability for ourselves. How can we as consciousness interact with the LCS to make that a stronger bond?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. We do that by being serious about growing up. If you're serious about growing up, becoming love, understanding reality and how it works and your place in it, if that's a really serious thing with you, then you become a person of interest. And the system will, produce things, give you things that help you understand. And we call those things often synchronicities. Oh, I walked into the library and I looked down the shelf and there was this book, bright red cover, just sticking out of the shelf. And so you get the inclination to go down and see what that's about. And it turns out to be just exactly the book you needed to read that fills in just the information that you've been wondering about. And we call that synchronicities. Synchronicities are just the LCS trying to help you get what you need to grow up. And of course, it has an interest in you growing up because as you evolve, it evolves. You're a piece of it. So your evolution is its evolution. So it's motivated to help us as much as it can without violating our free will. It can't do us for us. It can't, it has to, all the things it does have to have a, what do we call, plausible deniability, such that somehow you overlooked those car keys on your desk. You don't know how, but somehow you must have overlooked them. Well, that's not very plausible, but it's deniability anyway. So it has to work within the uncertainty in your world. It can do things within that uncertainty to help you out. So that's the main reason. How do you get to be that person of interest? Just take it seriously. You want to grow. You want to evolve. And you're making steps to do that. It's not just in your intellect, but it's at a deep level. Now, the other thing is it has to do with who and what you are. If you are constantly getting information out of the database to satisfy your ego and your ego's needs, if you want to grow up so you can have power and read people's minds so you can manipulate them more thoroughly and things like that, then that's not good. You diminish that. And even if the system was working with you, it starts to work with you less because egos want to know, inquiring egos want to know instead of inquiring minds want to know. So it depends on what you're doing. If you want to go to past lives and you find that you were the Queen of Sheba and you were a mighty person and a terrific warrior and everybody loved you, and that's because that's what your ego would like to hear, then you're not a serious student. You're still playing with the ideas. And it'll work with you some, but it's going to not work with you as much as it works with somebody who's really serious about it. And like I say, those people who aren't serious at all and aren't interested and would deny it, even if it happened to them, what's the point? It's wasting the time working with them. And it still might do some things to try to get them interested, but basically, if they're not, then they're not. They're not ready yet. So the system leaves them alone. They've never had a synchronicity. I suspect you have synchronicities every day. Things probably happen to you every day that are unusual and just kind of work out all the time. So that's the way it is after you kind of are serious at growing up. You know, it's just an amazing thing that people have a hard time believing when you're really in a good relationship with the larger consciousness system. Everything you need falls at your feet just as you need it. Not a minute before, just as you need it, it's there when you need it. The information you need is there just as you need it. The understanding, the problem is there. And just as the problem is ready to bite you, the solution appears. So that's the way life is when you're a person of interest and you're learning and you're doing well. Your life becomes kind of magical in a sense. And you have really phenomenal luck. You know, it's not really luck, you've earned it. But it seems like you have phenomenal luck. Just good things happen. You meet the right people at the right times. You're at the right place, you know, at the right time. And those things that are about to be a disaster, somebody taps you on the shoulder and gets your attention and shows it to you just before you get bitten, and you're able to avoid it. And I suspect, Brandon, that your life is like that on a day-to-day basis, because you've been doing this for, 20 years? So you've been serious about growing up for a long time. So that's just the way it is. So you stay in the good graces by continuing to learn, continuing to grow, and take understanding the big picture seriously, and take, becoming love seriously. That's how you get there, and it's how you stay there.
Oh, that was great. And you definitely described my life even before OBEs and meditation and starting to work on myself actively. That's how I lived my life before. Everything's going to work out. It always does. Why does everything I want fall into my lap somehow? I don't know. It just does. So it was just something that always happened. And I just assumed that happened to everybody. But, because you only know your life. So thank you so much for those insights. And that was very, the second part really extrapolated on the answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's great, Tom. Now I can tell all my video game friends whenever I win the random rolls all the time for the good gear that I've earned this good luck, you hear? I'm actually next. I got a question for you, Tom, particularly about your personal experience. You've mentioned a few times that you are operating in more realities than one, right? You got other stuff going on. And I wanted you, the best you could, to give us a snapshot or a kind of summary of what your stream of information's like in regards to what a day is like. For instance, when I wake up, I go to sleep and I wake up, I lose consciousness for a time, and I got things on my to-do list, and I know I got to do this, and I got to take care of my body some, and eventually I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to lose consciousness for a while. Maybe I'll have some dreams or get an OBE. And I'm wondering, what's that stream of information like you? Are you switching bandwidth? Are you sometimes tuning bandwidth down on this reality to like 10%? Oh, it's almost bedtime. I can go, do you have to-do lists in other realities? Do you have situations where, you accidentally were dosed with some sugar, so now your day in another reality is completely shot? All right, I can't do that in this reality. Can you give us a snapshot on what your life is like?
Yeah. Well, it's not as exciting as you imagine. It's just it's my normal life. It's the way things are. And I can start out by saying that I tend to live, say, 75, 80% of my life is lived from the intuitive side. The other 25 or 30%, is lived from the intellectual side. Those two sides cooperate with each other and work together pretty much. But I find the intuitive side is more, what should I say? It does more and can do more than the intellectual side. Intellectual side needs logic, and logic is hard to come by if you don't have all the information. So the information comes from the intuitive side. They pass it over to the logical side, which does some analysis on it, send it back over to the intuitive side to see how that plays in the big picture. And it runs and rattles back and forth. And then you live that life, but both sides are operating all the time. But mostly I'm more in intuitive mode than I am in intellectual mode. Unless there's something I need to think about and do analysis on, then I shift over to the intellectual mode. And yes, I drift, in and out of this reality a lot where I guess if you were sitting in a room with me, you just kind of think that I was off in mind space someplace. And that's generally true. I am off in mind space someplace, but I am working on something or doing something that requires me to be there. And I may be there for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, and I maybe come back and do the things I need to do here. And then I may go back there and do some things that need to be there. But I'm in and out all the time. It's not like I go to, I stay in one place half the day and go in another place the other half of the day. It's not like that. I'm in and out of things all the time. And when I talk to you and answer your questions, you sometimes, the people who are very sensitive can see me kind of changing phase and gathering information and then coming back and talking about the information and tripping out again and coming back. So it's just part of the way of being. And I've done that for so long that I really don't even notice very much. The transitions have gotten pretty much unnoticeable. So I guess a better way to describe it is I live in a larger reality than most people live in, because it all seems to blend together into one kind of reality that's sometimes this way and that way. But it's not like I say, oh, I need to go to this reality and do this thing. If I need to be there to do that thing, then I just am there and doing that thing because that's what needs to be done now. And something happens here that brings me back, then I do that now. But it all tends to work seamlessly. It makes it sound like I'm being jerked here and there and everywhere, but there's no jerking going on. It's a smooth transition from space to whatever's going on. And I try to give my attention to where my attention needs to be, wherever that is. So I don't really do anything paranormal anymore, but if somebody tells me about an illness or a problem, I'll give it some thought and I'll send some energy. I found out that I can be as effective in 15 seconds as I would be in 15 minutes. So it doesn't take much time. You can do things very quickly. So I don't know. My life is really a multidimensional life, I guess, in that sense. But it doesn't seem odd to me because I don't really see boundaries between them. I just live in a bigger space that contains more things going on. And sometimes, it's a zero-sum game. If you only have 100% of your attention and you put it various places. But mostly, if you're not doing things that are real demanding, living on interacting at 30% isn't hard to do. And most people don't really interact with much more than about 30% either. It's just the rest of their time, their mind is just doing crazy stuff and things are flying through it. And it's just non-productive stuff. But a lot of people don't giving more than 30 or 40% of what they're capable of anyhow. So you kind of fit right in with that. It doesn't seem that odd. So that's what my life is, that I just live in a larger reality with more choices than I had, say, 20 or 30 years ago. And that keeps growing and changing, with time. So it's not that big a deal. It's not real sexy or, amazing things happening, or anything like that. It's just normal life in a bigger space. You do what you need to do, and you try to always do everything at lowest entropy that you can think of. And I don't know. For me, it's not all that special. It's just the way it is. It's just kind of the nature of the reality that I live in. But, like Brandon, things fall at my feet just as I need them. If something terrible is about to happen, I'll find out about it just before it happens. I can avoid it or fix it. It's no longer that I even find that worth noting. It's just normal. It's just the way life is. And yes, crazy things happen all the time. Since I started going out to Monroe's lab, so many unusual and bizarre things have happened to me that they've become normal. The bizarre is everyday normal. So I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to bizarre. I just smile and look at it and say, that's odd, but I go on with my life and hardly even note it and don't remember it particularly. So that's kind of where I am. But, you still have responsibilities places. So you have to be responsible. It's not that you just become an air cadet that not really paying attention to anything. You have things to pay attention to. You have places that you need to be at certain places and do things. And you have a lot of people that depend on you or you interact with. So you have to take care of business. That's important. I have a lot of meetings on Zoom that I have to show up for, so you have to be there and focus on those things. And while you're focusing on those things, you can be thinking about other things, but it depends on how much of your mind needs to be focused. If you can get by with 30%, then you get 70%, you can be doing something else. But some tasks require, 98%. You need to really be focused on those things. And then you focus on those and everything else drops away. And it's like the rest of the world disappears. You're not even in the world. You don't even notice that you have a body. You're just a mind having a conversation that takes 100% of your attention because you're being interviewed on a particular subject and the questions are difficult that you have to focus on what it is you're talking about. And at that point, I'm not aware of my environment. I'm not aware even that I'm wearing a headset or talking to a mic or anything else. I'm just all mind having a conversation. The body doesn't really even show up, which is why I can often have these conversations for 5 or 6 or 7 hours and everybody else needs a break, but I'm just chugging on along because my body isn't even there in the process. I've kind of turned it off. I know I used to do particularly one I did in Germany. I was up front and then as soon as there was a break, everybody surrounded me and was talking to me. And then the break was over. So I went back and then there was another break and everybody surrounded me was talking to me. And pretty soon people are coming up and say, are you real? Are you really a human? You've been here now for, 6 hours and have never gone to the bathroom, never eaten anything, never had anything to drink. And I just don't notice because that's not where I am. It's not about the body. It's about paying attention and trying to get good answers for people to help them grow. So the body kind of disappears and shuts down. But it doesn't always work that way. It just depends on the setting and what you're into and how significant it is and a lot of other variables. So.
It's great. That's a great glimpse into what's going on with you in your personal life and hearing the perspective of, someone who's been growing for a while and what their daily stream of consciousness is like. Thank you.
Justin, when Tom was reciting his process of switching data streams, I recall your painting where you captured that moment of his thought, and that was so beautiful. And he pointed a finger um, as to point to the problem and thought, and the whole process was done with you drawing it out. Maybe could you explain that just a bit before we get to your question? I know you did a giclée print of that process, and I just love looking at it. Could you tell us how you did that and what inspired you?
The inspiration came from exactly what Tom was talking about, and just the idea of being, in multiple or connected to multiple things at once, and not just being like this body having this single isolated experience, but being connected to multiple different things at once and getting information from different places. the idea came to me watching him. I think it was an interview, and I was just kind of watching the way you shifted into different facial expressions, and I could kind of get the sense that you were more present and then less present and then kind of excited about some topic and then kind of mellowed out a little bit more. So I just saw all these different phases. So that gave me the idea to kind of try to combine all these different faces, kind of disjuncted, but simultaneously existing. So yeah, that's where it came from. And
You
the
have,
prints are available for sale, by the way.
I was going to ask you, do you have your a link or a website for that?
Yeah, it's just on justinsnodgrass.com.
Okay,
Somewhere in there, there says shop, and you can buy the print. And
thank
yeah,
you.
quite a few have sold, so I'm happy they're
It's a
out and
really
about in the world.
special one. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead with your question.
So this one too, I haven't really formulated completely, but I'll see if I can make it clear. It has to do with personal growth or spiritual growth. And it kind of seems like there's not only two ways, but in my mind, there's kind of these two distinct ways. One is being more active and approaching it head on, like letting go of fear and ego, where you kind of roll up your sleeves and you get to work and you try to figure out, all of the problems in your life and how they affect you and how your motivations create some of the problems, and more of almost like a psychological approach. I know there's a lot of books that kind of deal with this type of, I think one is the internal family systems and different ways to kind of understand the voices in your head. But then there's that approach, which I think is great and works fine. But then there's also this other approach that for me kind of just seems to fit better. But sometimes I do wonder if it's a little too passive. But it's the idea that if I can go through life with like a slightly expanded awareness, so to speak, as a metaphor, sort of with always having some sort of awareness that, oh yeah, this is a schoolhouse, and not just conceptually, but like actually feel that sense of like as I talk about it, I get a little buzzy feeling in my body. It's almost like being lucid in a dream, but like maintaining that lucidity. But so this other approach would be trying to maintain that to some degree as you go through life, and as things come, you keep that slightly higher perspective, it seems like, and just kind of go and experience and be, and that's it. Like it's already all happening anyway. All of the lessons you're already in it. So there's not necessarily anything to go and do and start to work on because you're already here working on it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So I
there
wonder
are
if you could
two.
talk about the distinctions.
Yeah, those are two different methodologies. And one of them is basically working from your intellect, from your logic, trying to solve the problem step by step, the way logic does. And the other one is basically on the intuitive side. You just exist and be on the intuitive side, and you're kind of connected with everything, and you're aware of who you are and what you are and kind of the choices you're making. And within that awareness, you just develop. You outgrow fears. They just drop away because you've been living in a space where the fear doesn't compute. The fear isn't a part of it. So I'd say that the intuitive method is probably more powerful and quicker. The method with the intellect has one downside. Its upside is, of course, that it's easy. You read a book, you go through a process, and you continue that process, and it does work, and you will make, you can make real progress that way. But the downside to the intellectual way is that you end up acting rather than being. That's the problem when you go through the intellect. You say, okay, I should get rid of my fear. And next time, I feel angry, I'll just smile. So you get into this thing that whenever anger comes up, you smile instead. Well, that's very civilizing for everybody around you, but it doesn't help you grow up any, because you're not changing at the being level. You just learned an effective method to short circuit the negative part of what's going on. So it does make your life better, because now you're not exhibiting the negativity, so you don't get negativity back, and it makes things better. But you don't necessarily grow up much because it's acting, not being. So that's the risk in doing it the intellectual way. The intellect is very good at acting. And it's sometimes hard to tell whether you're being or whether you're acting. Am I authentic, or is this my persona that I have? And many people, if you ask them how authentic they have no idea. Or is this you that you're showing me an authentic you? And they really don't know, because it's hard to separate those two. What's authentic and what's part of your persona? What's part of your image of yourself? How you think you are and how you think you should be. And that's the way you act. But that's not necessarily the way you are. So that's why I would say that the intuitive side is probably better, because, all right, it's not very organized. It just kind of happens when it happens. It's not a very organized process. On the other hand, it's done at the being level. So those things that do occur to you to change and be differently, well, now you've got them. You've got them at the being level. It's real change. So I think the intuitive way is probably better, but people are suited to different things. Some people like the struggle, the noodling it out in their head and grabbing those fears and ripping it up with their roots and doing it again and again until they finally succeed. And that works. That's not a bad way. But the passive way, as you called it, works just as well. And it's probably a different kind of person is good at that. The person that's good at that is probably a person that's good at meditation, that's good at kind of dropping out in their mind and being stable there, living their life at that authentic, intuitive space rather than in a persona that they've learned works well in the world. So different sorts of people have to work that in different ways, but they both can be effective. I tend to live in an intuitive space now, but 30, 40 years ago, I was mostly living in the intellectual space. So you change as you grow.
Yeah, that makes sense. The intuitive approach is less painful in my experience too, and a lot happier. And yeah. So yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
It's easier, but you have to. It has its own downside, as you could just kind of get in that space and be lazy, not really do anything. You have to constantly have your intention to learn and to grow. So it requires a kind of a constant attention, just like the other one does. So it's just easier and gentler and probably more effective for some than others.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Silvio, you're up next. Go on ahead.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Nice seeing you. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Sylvia.
So my question is this. As you know, I'm writing a book. And I'm having this experience where, you go to a dinner party, you go wherever, and oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm writing a book. What's the book about? And you're like, okay. And one of the things that has really been this sort of obvious pattern is that when I tell them what the book is about, they'll kind of find me in a quiet moment, go into a quiet corner and be like, I had this dream and my grandmother came back to me, or, some profound experience. And by and large, these are people that I think are not generally terribly open to another reality. They're very fixed on, well, if you don't think material's material, you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever. They just haven't been aware of like another way to view these things. And the thing that I'm curious about is it seems to be so healing for them when I say, yeah, I believe you. I think it was real. And, there's a way to think about this that doesn't mean you have to either choose between being a superstitious, mad person, versus, someone that's, rational. And you must have this experience all the time. And I'm just really curious about that healing element, that like specifically the fact that they don't know, whatever, but brings tears to their eyes And I think sometimes it's something they may not even thought about for 5 years. So it's not like they're actively worrying about it. And yet, once they reveal it, then and they say, yeah, I think it's real. And I think a rational person has a way to think about these sorts of experiences. Um, it just seems to lighten them, or so often, even sort of men like, was in the Israeli army and I was in venture capital, but they get tears in their eyes. Anyway, I want to toss that to you and just ask about your experience with that, and if you have any, advice or just reflections on that sort of the healing that happens when people start to be able to put that kind of experience into another context.
What you're doing is telling them that it's okay to have that experience. It's okay to be them. They don't have to hide it. They don't have to think that maybe they're insane or maybe they just made it all up. That it's a real experience. Experience is experience. And they experience this. And trying to verify and authenticate and judge that experience that just creates problems. It's just your experience, and it's okay to accept it and not judge it at all. Don't judge it as I made it up or I didn't make it up or it was real. It was your experience. And what did you feel and what did you learn from that experience? And it kind of gives them a permission to just be, whereas the culture they live in does not give them that permission. The culture says, no, that couldn't happen. You made that up, or that's something that they know better. Inside their mind, they say, no, I didn't make that up. That was real. And the point is, it doesn't matter how real it was. What did you get from it? What was the value of it? How did it solve a problem or give you closure or whatever it did for them? Because it always has had some sort of major effect like that on them, or they wouldn't bring it up 5 years later, So it was obviously something that did impact them, and that they should just accept the impact and what they learned from it and the feeling they got from it and appreciate that and stop worrying about how real it is. Stop worrying about, that sort of thing. So it gives them permission to be, just to be at ease with that. And here you are, another human being, and you don't chide them for being foolish. You say, oh, yeah, it's probably just the way you experienced it. It's your experience. If it's your experience, it's your reality. Accept it and learn from it, and it's all right. And telling people that they're okay when they're afraid that they're not is very empowering to them. It's like, oh, I shouldn't be ashamed of this. I shouldn't be afraid to talk about it or say anything about it. And I get a lot of that. I got a lot earlier on, but I get a lot of that because I am strange enough of a person that people feel comfortable telling me about their strange experiences. So I've had any number of people said, I've never told this to anybody else, but I feel like I can tell it to you. You'll understand. So it's
I
the
think
same
I'm
thing.
becoming strange enough too, Tom, because that's what they're saying to me. So I guess I'm in the strange camp.
Yeah, I think that's it. When you are strange enough that people feel comfortable telling you the strange experience they had, because they believe that at least there's a chance that you're not going to judge them. You're going to accept that experience as their experience. And it's not something to be judged. It's something to be treasured by them. It's part of their experience. So yes, I get an awful lot of that. I probably hear more strange stories than anybody because people feel safe talking to me about it, and they know that I won't judge them on it. I do ask them questions, but I hear hundreds of exceptionally strange stories that they've never told anybody else because they don't think they'll be judged. And they need to express it. It was a big experience. It affected them in a way. And to just carry that around and never express it is a burden. You feel so much better for just being able to tell somebody and have it accepted. So yes, writing this book has probably put you into the strange category. And they know that you're not going to judge them from doing something that is not acceptable to, at the at the cultural level. Culture says physical world is all we've got. It's all the reality there is, and anything else is just somebody's imagination. So that's the cultural belief. And of course, that's just not true. And there's lots of people walking around with experiences that they're ashamed to tell because they know they're going to get people making fun of them or thinking that they're goofy. And how could you believe that? Yeah, you just made that up. That was a dream.
But can I ask a follow-on question to all that?
Sure.
What's surprising to me is if you look at surveys that have been done of people's beliefs and, ask, do you believe we manifest our own reality? Do you believe in angels? Do you believe in synchronicities? It hovers between 50 and 80% on any of these questions. Like it's maybe there's some that go down to 30%, but on average, answers to questions like those across the population in the US are surprisingly high. And so it's kind of like people live with these there's just a lot of dissonance, I think, where people are like, yeah, I believe that I can manifest, or I believe that that song came on the radio for me. But oh, this other stuff is crazy. There's a real, and I'm not sure where that crazy line is for people, but there clearly is one. Or the phone synchronicity. You and I had a recent conversation about this. How, when you go to pick up the phone to call a friend that you haven't spoken to for 6 months, and magically that person is calling you. That's kind of like a mild paranormal experience that most people who don't believe in paranormal experiences are willing to embrace and be like, oh yeah, that always, who that always happens with? That always happens with my friend Sharon or whatever. So it's funny because it's a sliding scale. It's like somewhere there's a tipping point where no, that's crazy. But there's people are edging closer, I think, to statements that feel like they belong in this space as opposed to in a materialist space.
Yeah, I think that it is sliding. I see that and feel that too. But one of the big differences is when you answer one of those questionnaires, it's just you. It's not a social thing. You're not with other people. You're not going to be judged by it. You just can write down, and most of those are anonymous. You don't put your name and your telephone number or anything down. You're just another person that they asked. So it's entirely anonymous. And when people do things that are totally anonymous, they can be totally honest because there's nobody going to call them on it or call them foolish or anything else. So the numbers go way up. It's the same with paranormal things. When you ask just random people, have you ever had a paranormal experience? You get something like 75, 80% of the people say, yeah, I've had a paranormal experience.
Yeah.
But put them on a talk show where 1,000 people are listening and ask them the same question, and they'll say, I don't know. I've had a few strange things, but I don't think so. I don't think it really was paranormal. They'll sidestep it because they don't want to be judged by their culture, and their culture finds that to be silly. So they don't want to sound silly. So I think we get much higher statistics when you ask people by themselves. The physics community is that like when you talk to individual scientists, particularly in my case, the physicists, a whole lot of them are pretty open-minded. But if you see them in a group of other physicists, none of that comes out. None of that's talked about. It's like that's taboo. You just don't go there. So the public person and the private person tend to be two different people. And that's a problem we have with a culture that has, enforces cultural correctness on all the people in the culture. And most people's lives are not culturally correct. They have things that go outside of those bounds and the way they think, and the way they do, but they keep that quiet because you can't say that public or you'll be censured for it. So I think that's the reason. But while we talked about your book, why don't you tell the other people here and the 10 or 20 or 50,000 people who eventually see this video of what that is. Tell them a little bit about your book and what it is and why it is and so on.
Yeah, sure. And I think a lot of people here have heard this. So a couple people may have even read a couple chapters or so. But yeah, so the book is really about meeting you, Tom, nearly 50 years ago. Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
Yes. And I think I met you probably right around the time you were finishing up your time at Monroe. Which is quite crucial for me because it meant that you'd already learned to do a lot of strange things and you'd learned to do some remote viewing and healing. And when I first met you, you hadn't yet written My Big Toe or had a big theory of everything. You just were kind of learning to do stuff and had abilities. And you shared those with me when I almost died in a car accident. And so the book is really about my process of learning about reality in a different way through you over the course of my life. And there are times in the course of my life where I sort of ignored it. It was like, oh, yeah, some weird stuff happened, but, I'm off to go to business school or whatever. So, there's times when there was like a little bit of a pullback. And then I think really when my son got sick and I turned back to you after the doctors didn't have any answers, a little bit like my mother turned to you when I was in the hospital. And then I thought, okay, I'm now an analytical adult. I'm no longer a teenage girl going, wow, yeah, that's kind of cool. He can read my x-rays or whatever. I was an analytical adult. And that's when I really sort of wanted to understand and started to reconnect with your work more deeply. So Linda's saying to tell the chicken story. Okay, I'll tell the chicken story. Everybody loves the chicken story. It's not the most impressive thing you ever did, but it's very, evidential, I think. Um, so do you remember the chicken story, Tom?
Oh, yes, I do. I
Yeah.
remember it very well.
Yeah. So
Mm.
when I was in college, I got a phone call from my mom, and she said, "Celia, have you been eating a lot of chicken?" And the cafeteria had closed, and I was in the dorm because I was having to do a makeup exam. And I was just plowing through a family-sized value pack of chicken in my dorm refrigerator. Immigrant child, we do not waste food. And I wanted to eat it before break. I had to get on a plane to go back home to Charlottesville. And I said, okay. And this is 1982. So it's an analog world. There's no Instagram. There's no cameras on your computer. There's no computers, actually, well, none that are in your dorm room. And I was like, actually, I've only been eating chicken, Mom. I'm having it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm just trying to get through the value pack before I go home. She's, oh my gosh, And I was like, but how did you know that? Of course, she said, oh, Tom just called me from Huntsville and said he sometimes checks up on you, Sylvia, and he tells me that he's not sure what's happening, but you are eating too much chicken, and it's creating an imbalance of some kind. And so, oh my gosh, Sylvia, you have to stop eating chicken. Tom says to stop eating chicken. So I threw away the chicken, went to the grocery store, got some apples and crackers and cream cheese, and like lived on something else for a few days before I went home for Christmas break. So that's the sort of things that happened to me over the course of my life, Tom.
Yeah, well, yes, off and on. Huh? From my end, what happened was that I always got kind of messages from you and how you were doing and what you were doing, and I did kind of check in on you on the non-physical ways that I have to check on people. And one time when I was doing that, I just noticed chicken everywhere. It was all chicken, nothing but chicken. And then I was talking to your mom, and in my mind, I said, I'm not going to bring that up. That doesn't need to be told to her mom. And another voice said, oh yeah, go ahead. Tell her about all the chicken. And I resisted, and I said, no, that's just things I get with Sylvia, and I don't include her mother in that. And this voice said, go ahead, tell her about it. So I said, okay. I said, Sylvia is just ODing on chicken. There's chicken everywhere.
She's a strange girl.
Yeah. So I had no idea she'd call you up or what she'd do with it or anything else. But I was told a couple of times to share that with your mother. And so I did.
Oh, yes, you knew what she was going to do, Tom. You knew my mother well enough for that.
So she called you up right away. And Sylvia, what is it about the chicken?
Yeah.
Yes. So I did share that, but typically I don't share those things with anybody else. It's just me keeping track of Sylvia and how she is, and everything's all right. That was fun though.
Yeah. So that's the book. It's really a big picture perspective. I don't try and explain quantum physics in the book, although I touch on just a little bit of the theory, just because, as I've been going through this process, as you know, for 2.5 years now, and I share chapters with my writing group and other people, I'm realizing that what people really like is the storytelling and how it impacted me and what my understanding was. And if I start to get too much in the weeds, and I'm not a physicist anyway, but if I start to get too much in the weeds, people are like, no, we want the story. So really, it's evolved into something that's a little different than what I originally wanted. And it's really about how, life under your mentorship was just so much better. And particularly the more I learned and the more you learned, because, like I said, this was before you had a, theory of everything. You didn't tell me love is the answer when I was 14 years old and bedridden in a hospital, but you did tell me things that clearly were early signs of that. So it's really about that sort of, evolution and how it changed my understanding and therefore how I live my life, which I think will track with a lot of people on this call have experienced.
So when is this going to be published? Sometime in the next 6 months?
Well, so I'll tell you, who knows? I mean, I'm looking for an agent and publisher right now, but I will tell you a teeny story in that I met a publisher who at first was like, yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, I can't publish this kind of content. You get the fear of the paranormal stuff. And I was like, okay, but she was willing to sit with me and talk to me about it and give me some advice. And then eventually I don't want to out her, but she'd had some sort of paranormal thing happen in her family. And she sort of said, I'm not superstitious, but, and when someone says I'm not superstitious, where their mindset currently is, I'm not superstitious, but there was this experience. And then she said, you know what, send me the full manuscript. I may not be able to publish it, but I really want to read it. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly. And I was like, beautiful. If it helps you as one person, I'm delighted to send it to you. But that is, I think that is what it will eventually kind of persuade a publisher to be interested in this material, is that she is like, half of the people that I meet on every day is that people are like, I don't really want to admit to it, but boy, I really want to read that. I want to understand it. So I think that sort of is my target market, is people that are, really curious and just want to kind of take one step into understanding it. And the fact that I don't have paranormal powers, that's never been the part of the thing that's been interesting me. I'm really interested in how does this help me live my life? How does understanding, how does having a bigger picture of reality help me? And that to me is the most interesting question. So for people that are sort of, coming along that path, hopefully that'll be interesting to some of them as well. So I don't know when it's going to be published. I gotta get it. I'd like to find an agent and a publisher. So that's the next step.
Great.
Yeah. So, and I need someone to finish reading the draft I sent them too.
Can't imagine who that would be. Probably some real busy guy.
I know, it's a guy who spends his life on Zoom. It is, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, are there other questions? I think, thank you for time to talk about my book. It's been an amazing experience. I'm really enjoying writing it.
We're looking forward to it. I love the chicken. The chicken story was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read that book.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
This wraps up our Fireside Chat, our 96 Fireside Chat. I thank you for joining us. This was one of the better ones. The questions were just great. And Sylvia, you really ended it with a great ending, a great story. Thank you so much for being here, all
You
of
know,
you.
Donna, can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I love that story for a couple reasons. And I'm sure all of us have had a similar experience where we're getting nudged to communicate to somebody and we're thinking in our heads, am I really going to talk about chickens to, Sylvia's mom, and it's just like how powerful of an experience this was for someone else. And it would make you look foolish, at least in your own mind, to communicate something like this. And the
Yeah.
the moral from Tom's point is, well, just say it and, see how the chips fall after I say this, what seems to be very silly thing. That's such a great story.
Don't hold back. I mean,
Yeah,
Armand can tell you that
right.
from his remote viewing experience. It's the first thing that comes to your mind. Use it.
Yeah. What a great chat today, huh, guys?
Wonderful.
We had a
Thanks,
good one
everyone.
today. Yep.
Fantastic. We'll see you next
Thank you,
time.
Tom.
Thanks for
Thank you,
coming. Thanks,
Donna.
Tom.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tom.
Donna.
Adam.
Thank you.
Thank
That was
you.
awesome.
Everybody.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello. This is Donna of MBT Events. As one of the producers of Tom Campbell's immersive events, Exploring Consciousness, the hundreds of hours of audio preserved from them was the inspiration for Gems from Tom Campbell's Immersives. Every usable nugget from all the information Tom imparted through those wonderful years is now available to you and future generations. What a gift it was to be a part of this wonderful journey of consciousness and the discovery of the paranormal as normal, guided by Tom. These live presentations produced varied and insightful information on the out-of-body experience and the paranormal abilities in an easy-to-understand, user-friendly format as only Tom can do it. The core concepts of MBT delivered in different ways for maximum being level learning. For as long as I've been listening to and interviewing Tom, when I jumped back into the hundreds of hours of audio from these immersives, I discovered that these gems gave me a fresh perspective on the information Tom teaches, and I found new insights and aha moments that reinforced those things I thought I knew well. I know you will find the gems helpful, inspiring, and fun too. Impromptu side stories are included. Details can be found in the description below. Thank you.
I and MBT Events hope you like this video. If you do, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions, and most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.